Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Lake Bluff Public Library Bylaws and Policy Committee. I am going to take roll call on tonight, Wednesday, July 13th at 7 p.m. I call this meeting to order at 7:07 and roll call starting with Trustee Friedeman.
Present.
Trustee Graziano.
Here.
Great, thank you so much. And we do have a quorum. Trustee Matt Zaute is just now joining us. And so, hi Matt, we just did roll call. So officially, Trustee Zaute.
Aye.
Perfect, here. Okay, perfect.
Here.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Appreciate your flexibility.
Yeah,
All
no,
right.
sorry for holding her up. I hope I didn't hold you guys up.
No, it was just fine, no problem. Okay, and so the next item on our agenda, we are going to move on to reviewing and discussing the proposed fiscal year to 2023-2024 goals for the committee. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then I'm going to share it again, showcasing what Chair Friedeman and I have been discussing and what Trustee Friedeman has developed. So do you want me to pass the baton over to you, Allie?
Sure, I'm happy to talk through it. And then if you want to kind of jump in with the notes now that you've had some time to sit with it, that works. So the tracker, the sheet that's on the screen is a tracker that I just pulled together using the existing policies that are made public on our website, and went through and just categorized them, you know, what category, what's the number, the name, and then the date that it was approved by the board, to track which items have maybe gotten a little stale, which were updated recently. And then I just did a kind of a formula column on a suggested revision date on a 2-year cycle. So every 2 years, making sure we at least review, discuss, edit if necessary. And then Renee and I met and talked through what the revision priorities are on a low to high scale based on the priorities in the board meetings and also some recent events. And so that is something that we kind of went through and just marked really the high priority, which are things that have already been brought up either as a board as a whole or in committees. So this is kind of everything that exists now. And then a few things I think that are would be considered new, but mostly things that are already made public on the website. And then Renee has added in some notes as well. Something that came up while I was going through this is there are a few inconsistencies. There are a lot of policies that maybe are intertwined with others. So one example is the library user conduct policy. It references, other policies. It's also dependent on the patron suspension policy. So there is some interconnectedness that we have to be sort of aware of when we do go through and do some policy work, just to make sure there's no, conflicting information. So essentially thinking we could use this as a place to just keep track of progress, identify what the most kind of high priority items are as we move forward in our work. And that based on at least my understanding now, there are some policies that have no approval date listed on the actual policy. I'm sure we could go back and look at the board meeting minutes, but there are a few that we may want to consider, even though they're not flagged as high priority yet, because we don't know how old they are. So they just may not be reflective of current practice. So that is this tool in a nutshell.
Well, and I just want to thank you, Trustee Friedeman, for putting this together. The library does not currently have a tracker of our policies. As this committee knows, there's a lot of policy work to do, and this is just such a great tool from a director's standpoint, from a committee standpoint, for the committee to be reporting out to the board so that the board can visually see the progress. And it's just kind of a one-stop shop. So I just really want to thank you, Allie, for taking the initiative and putting this together.
Sure.
Yeah, I echo that. This is great, Allie. Good to have it all in one place. The grouping at the bottom, is there merit today to go through those and see if any of that do not have dates associated with them? If there are any there, should we discuss those today for prioritization?
Yeah, I think we can, especially because there isn't necessarily a motion attached to it. We can add that as part of our discussion when we talk about all the policies. One of the things that we wanted to talk about first before we dive into the individual ones, I think we'll take the majority of the time going through each one. And as a committee, you will all discuss which ones you want to prioritize this year. Ali and I wanted to present draft goals for the committee. Now, I think every committee, as I will continue to work with you all, will have a different number of goals, different type of goals, obviously because the work differs. But these were the goals that we wanted to present to the committee tonight. And so I'll read through them and just open it up for discussion. And then if we agree on the goals, then we would report back to, then the committee would report back to the board on the goals and we would work towards them. So that's the section up here in purple that Ali's highlighted. So the first goal that we came up with, and this was a lot of, it's related to the structure and presentation of the policies in terms of transparency to the community. The way that our policies are presented to the library community is on our website, but it is currently on our financial webpage that has just a lot of information on one page. In fact, I can even show it to you right now. And it is not easy to find. And then I was saying, I was thinking to myself that when I was applying here, I was having difficulty finding the library policies because of where it was. And so currently it's on this page called Policies, Financial, Other Information. And there's a desire, at least from my end and the communication team, to create just a policies page to provide more direct link for the public to get to the information that they need. So right now you can see it has all of our information on it, from audits to resolutions to budget, and then our policies are kind of hidden in here. And so one of the goals then we proposed, or are proposed to the committee, are to restructure the library website with policy information, create a new page dedicated to policies, developing naming conventions, standardizing numerical systems, increasing accessibility for the public, and essentially just cleaning up a little bit of how we present that information to the public.
When you say standardize the numerical system, what do you mean by that?
Yes, so currently we have a numbering system for our policies. You can see that in this column right here, Ali's put them here. There are different categories for the different types of policies that we have: governance, use, collections, information, and then each policy has a policy number. There's not one system. It's not policy A through Z. It's a alphabetical and numeric system that relates to the policy name and number. So for example, when I click on our computer use policy, it sends you to our webpage for the policy, and you can see this alphanumeric system identifying this particular policy. So I myself don't necessarily understand how these are determined, and they're not as easy to understand, I think, for the public standpoint. Ali, do you have any feedback, being kind of newly exposed to this system as you were diving into the policy?
Yeah, I don't mind so much like the alphanumeric combination. It was more a comment for me, at least, on one example is in the line 6, the collection development policy. So when you actually go into that policy, there is no number. It's just the COLL. It's just, it doesn't have a number. So if we're going to standardize or reference things like, oh, this is the Gov3 policy, we just need to make sure that it's standard across all of them. So collection right now, collection development doesn't have a policy number. I just made a note on that in that column H there. And so just making sure that whatever we decide to go with, even if it is this alphanumeric thing, that it's consistent. I don't mind it though, in terms of the 1, 2, 3. My guess is that it's just the order in which those policies were developed and adopted. At least that's how I interpreted it, but maybe that's incorrect.
It's highly likely. I think
Yeah.
that's probably a safe assumption.
And I don't think there's a problem with that. I think it's more just like if we have collection development, if you look at the collection development policy, that's a pretty meaty policy. And then in the event that there's a section of the policy, so gifts is one example, that's section 4 of the collection policy. If we wanted to make a revision to that section, we're revising the collections policy in its entirety, you know, in terms of like how we present it to the full board. So if we wanted to break up some of the larger ones into individual policies, that may be something that we would want to take into account when figuring out a standard naming convention, or continuing the one that we have and just making sure all policies have a policy number.
I think a good example of that exact thing, Allie, happening is the library user conduct policy. As it is now, and this week I had some fun doing some editing and some review of it. It's one policy, but the suspension and limitation section, which is very brief and very different from the separate policy that that the board already approved. And it includes the safe child policy, whereas the committee and the board could decide that these are completely separate policies. And actually it's just inconsistent on our website. We reference the safe child policy here, but then it's also referenced here. And I'm not sure if the wording is exact. I mean, we could do something as easy as hyperlinking in between just to make sure we're linking to the exact correct up-to-date policy. Where does it make sense to combine? Where does it make sense to separate? You know, the other thing that I wanted to say too is that a lot of this numbering system and alphanumeric, however, this system may have just been a carryover from the days that it was literally a policy manual printed up in a binder where people had to, you know, sift through pages. Now, libraries don't necessarily have a policy manual printed. It might be on their share drive, and it might be publicly on their website using a different system. So I wonder if that's some of it too, why there are all these like different ways of keeping track. So in terms of the goal, just wanted to give the committee this background as to why this goal was proposed.
Yeah, my first question was whether we need a policy number. But I kind of assumed this maybe was part of the governmental or regulatory environment that we have to specify certain things or we have to include certain attributes, but is a name sufficient by itself?
Every library does something different in terms of how they organize. I mean, this committee could decide that the name is the official title of the policy. And I mean, we'd want to have a list of all policies that the library has, so at least a reference of that, and that's what this tracker does. But you could decide not to have that. Some libraries' policy manuals just live on their webpage, so I think it's available to you to decide that.
What do the rest of the committee members think?
Go ahead, Renee.
No.
I was just going to say, I would be inclined to keep something that similar, like an alphanumeric something, in order to know at least what category it's in. I don't really care otherwise. You know, I feel like I would be fine using Gov 3, Gov 4. It doesn't really matter so much to me as long as it's the same across all of them. Yeah, I do think for the purpose of making it public to, you know, patrons and to the public on the website, that you would want to have the policy name. I don't think it's very friendly to have, you know, the numbers for folks.
Right.
But yeah, I would say just for like organizing sake, I'd be fine with really anything as long as it was standard.
I was going to add too that like these are goals for the committee to work towards the whole year. So this could be a continuing conversation where, you know, on the agenda, you know, you bring ideas and feedback to how you want it to be structured. We don't have to decide tonight, but it's good to just start getting people's feedback and thoughts percolating about these different items. Any other feedback about the proposed goal number 1?
The only other thing I was going to mention is outside of the finance page where these are referenced right now, there are some other links on the site. I don't know, in like the computer section under Explore that also point back to these policies. So when we have that consolidated page, we'll want to clean up those internal links.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt, for mentioning that.
We can do that. You know, that's something we can do automatically too if we're not familiar with our you know, where all the crosslinks and whatnot are on our site, if that would be helpful.
You'll have to tell me how to do that.
I could do it for you. It'd be I could do it for the board. It'd be a very easy process. It's a tool I have. Yeah.
Very open to that. I think there's
Okay.
a lot of room for improvement in our website too. I think you and I talked.
It's called a screaming frog crawl.
Oh, that's a fun name.
Isn't it? Yeah.
All right,
All right.
moving on to goal 2. Determine prioritized list of policies to review and revise to propose to the board for this fiscal year. And that's really what a lot of tonight's meeting will accomplish. You all as members will discuss what we've highlighted, weigh the pros and cons, and the amount of time that each policy will take. Roughly, we can talk about that. So that's goal 2. Goal 3, develop a rotating schedule of policy review for all policies. And as Ali identified, this is really just, you know, kind of inputted as standard every 2-year rotation, but so that we have this regular expectation for the board and for this committee that, and for the library staff, that we will go back to our policies and review them on a regular basis. And then the last goal is develop a procedural document of policy research, revision, creation, and approval in collaboration with library employees and director. And the reason this goal came out was, I mean, truthfully, just legacy planning. And as I knew, you know, documenting the process of policy creation or revision, none of that is documented for this organization. It would be a great tool for staff. It would be a great tool for this position to have. What is the role of the board? Where do they come into that process? And so forth. And so that is really an internal document. It wouldn't be a externally facing document, but something to keep track of what Lake Bluff Library's procedure is for writing and revising policy. So any discussion about the proposed goals? Hearing none, let me just look back on our agenda. So going forward, this is what Ali could present at the next board meeting to report out for the committee. We could have the board have an action item to approve these goals if they support that. And so it sounds like no other discussion at this time. Support for the goals? Lack of support for the goals? Any feedback there? Thanks, Allie, for the thumbs up. I appreciate it.
I mean, I know I helped like draft them, so that's silly of me, but.
Are there goals that are missing, or do we have too many? Is this achievable?
Yeah, I think it's achievable, right? So we're looking at the ones that are highlighted, because I'm sorry, I don't understand the revision dates. Am I reading them
We're
right?
just looking at the top right here.
Oh, you're just looking at the top, sorry, okay.
Yes. So basically determine the scope of work for this committee this year. What are we working on? Now that the committee is standing again, Or I don't know if it ever was, frankly. So now that the committee is standing, what is this group of trustees going to focus on?
Yeah, I think this seems achievable and in line with where our priorities are for the year as an overall board. And responsive to some of the challenges we had last year. So this seems like a good place to start. I think in terms of the rotating schedule of policy, we're almost finished with that at this point, right? Because we'll put a 2-year marker in here, and once the personnel and patron are updated and we prioritize the others, that we'll have our working list for the rest of the year, and that'll be the bulk of the consumption of our time is working through the rest of this. So I think these are good goals.
Yeah, I agree with you, Matt. I think, I'd love to pose the question to you all and maybe even to the board. Is every 2 years too much, too little? Given the length of the list of policies, every 2 years might work for some, but maybe not others. Like, for example, collection development, I think that needs to be looked at every 2 years, but would something like, I'm just trying to think of an example. I don't know. I'm just posing the question, coming up with that rotation of years per, I think
What's
that makes sense.
I'm sorry, I'm going to talk over here. What's the total count of policies? Is it 42?
Current list. And this is maybe not accurate because some of these are sections within a larger policy, the way that they're numbered. Like, for example, circulation. I would say circulation is one policy, but these are all different sections within the circulation policy. And so that's where that question comes. Do they stay one policy? Do we have a number system to designate the different sections for that larger policy? Same with collection development. So, we could have that conversation, but if I'm looking at the list that's public, 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, about 20.
Oh.
Am I very fast?
So it's what, 10 a year, 15 a year roughly. Well, but these aren't staggered at this point, so
Yeah.
No, not yet.
yeah.
Sorry, Allie, what did you say?
No, I was gonna say, yeah, once we like stagger some of them, I also think some of them will be like, some of them might be influenced by legislation, like the most recent legislation in terms of, the circulation piece around, new book banning or requests for consideration. And then some of them will probably be stuff that doesn't change and does not need to go to the board for approval.
Yeah, and I think for those more pedestrian sort of policies, maybe we just 2 years, it's a sniff test. Is there anything that seems out of line here and isn't consistent, or language has changed, whatever? And if not, then we move on to the next.
Totally.
Yeah, and 2 years is the outlier, right? So if we have something that comes up in the interim. Yeah. Okay.
It's
Seems
more
right
of a
to me.
like, hey, hey, nobody's looked at this since 1997. Then it'll be,
Right.
easy to see that.
Yeah, I never want us in that situation again after this work is done. So, so I'm really excited about this. Having a schedule, sticking to the schedule. The organization is going to be much more secure and protected with up-to-date policies. So it's all really, really good work that we're doing. So thank you, committee. So with that, I would say these goals can be presented to the board on during Tuesday's meeting, and I can have I could propose to Bonnie there be an action item to officially adopt these goals for the committee for the library, because everybody on the board will be working towards them. Does that work for the committee?
Good to me.
All right, well, thank you again. I'm going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is, well, we kind of already reviewed the list of policies and spreadsheets. So let's just dive in to a discussion about reviewing and discussing the prioritized policies and then determining next steps. So just again, to review kind of this section here, everything in yellow, all of those policies are something that Allie and I had identified in our meeting recently as wanting to have the committee discuss as a possible prioritization for this fiscal year. Not all of them, however, but there's a discussion to be had around each of them. And we already started some of this discussion already in the last committee meeting, but there are a couple just new information in terms of when the last update was that might influence our decision about the order with which we prioritize. So just to review at a high level what those policies are, personnel policy, and I remember Matt, for example, when we were discussing it, identified that as like number one, non-negotiable. Patron suspension policy, I would even say, Allie, I think we're ready to go to de-yellow or unhighlight this one because it's already done. So that is very exciting.
That was
So there's personnel policy, collection development policy, computer use policy, library user conduct policy, use of library provided wireless network policy, that's a mouthful, and reconsideration of library materials policy, which goes hand in hand with that collection development policy. So in kind of handling them one by one, there are reasons why the personnel policy really needs to be tackled next. Not just because of the governor passed Paid Leave Act law that goes into effect January 1, 2024, but as I reported, there are a lot of inconsistencies between policy and practice with regards to personnel. And one thing Allie and I did discuss is that it is an immense policy. And so perhaps this is a policy that is worked on across a larger span of time in alignment with another policy. And so maybe sections are taken personnel policy and moving on in each section as opposed to taking on the whole thing and working on it all at one time. Any comments or thoughts about the personnel policy or any changes in opinions about if that needs to be prioritized this year?
Nope.
I think, Allie, you had a really good comment when we met, the idea that the HR source report with regarding salary benchmarking and potentially just information that we glean from staff in a feedback loop of sorts will really help inform any changes that are needing to be made. Another thing I would say about the personnel policy is that we will need a lot of support from legal in this work too. As we would all policies, and they would need to review, but especially the personnel policy. We also have a subscription to the Illinois Risk Management Association, IRMA, and they would provide a lot of support for the library in updating this personnel policy, I imagine. And so I, as a director, knowing that this work is going to fall on the library staff to be giving lots of feedback to, I think this definitely needs to be prioritized, and staff are ready for this to happen.
And Renee, does the village provide any input or support when we're looking at this policy?
They could, they don't have to, since we are a separately governed institution by the board, but Bettina O'Connell at the village is incredibly helpful to me and has shared, very transparently what the village does, how the village manages things. A big distinction, for example, between our policy and theirs is we offer paid maternity leave. They do not. And so there are opportunities for the library to deviate from what the village is doing, and then there might be opportunities for us to maybe align more closely. But as we're a separate institution, they don't have oversight over our policies.
Yeah, they were really helpful when we had some questions, I think, in the past about some things.
Oh, I can't say enough good things about Bettina and everybody over there.
Yeah.
She answers a lot of my questions all the time.
Renee, one thing we had talked about with that personnel policy that you touched on is like that idea of kind of, if we break it apart, being able to work on the stuff that's not dependent on the HR source.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
because of things like the paid leave going into effect on January 1st, we wouldn't have time to incorporate the HR source report. So in terms of next steps, like would that be a place where I would say, you know what, I'm going to go into the personnel policy and maybe break up what might be the manageable section. I'll own that for the next meeting and bring the pieces that we could do without that report ahead of time. So I will take that.
I think that would be very, thanks for reminding me about that. Absolutely, if you'd be willing to take that. I would also be interested as you're going through those sections, what are the sections with which staff input is essential? I think, well, staff will have a feedback loop for the whole personnel policy, but I think there are some that especially we need their feedback on. And one section, for example, is the amount of paid time off different levels of staff in the hierarchy of the organization receive. Currently, it's not dependent on your budgeted hours. It's by a section of hours. So if you're a part-time staff that works 20 to 29 hours, the 20-hour person gets the same amount of paid time off as the 29-hour person. And I've already received feedback from staff that this is not as equitable as they might like to see it. And there are other sections I think that are important to see staff feedback too. So if you have any input there, like if you want to asterisk the ones that you're like, oh yeah, definitely staff here, that would be great.
Great. I will do that for our next committee meeting.
Thanks, Allie. Anything else to discuss with personnel policy? But it sounds like, is there agreement that this is going to be one of the prioritized policies for this year? Thumbs up or head nods? I'm seeing.
Yep.
You all thumbs up. That's great.
I'm adding it to my to-do list as we speak. So
Great.
it'll
So
be ready for next time.
I was going to say, we could even, if you want multiple levels of highlights, we could do green for go, that this is something that we're going to focus on. Just visually right now for the meeting.
Yeah, I can also, as we go through it, I can add in a column too that's like, is it in draft status or, you know, in process, just to keep an eye on that too.
That'd be great. So the next policy to discuss, collection development. A reason, I mean, we've talked a little bit about this already, but a reason that this came to the forefront again for discussion for this year is the amount of requests for reconsiderations that libraries are getting right now. And we are much more secure as an organization if our collection development policy is up to date and current. And so new information for today's discussion, the last time this was updated was 2018. That's a really long time. And so, and I would even say that that was, that predates a lot of new formats and new types of materials that the library has since acquired at that time. And of course predates a lot of, you know, it actually predates the library's value system, which our value statement that we have on our website. This was approved in 2020 in August. Matt and Jenny, you might remember this. But I think now that we have such a robust value statement approved by the board, this could be referenced in the collection development policy to provide even more clarity and scope and direction for how the library develops the collection. So just again, thinking of ways we can cross-reference other policies to provide more information to the public. This came after the last update, so that clearly means there's something to update for collection development too. And I'll just add that reference value statement. Discussion about this policy with regarding work this year.
I mean, it makes sense this would be a priority as well. Second to personnel, or at least after personnel.
Jenny, any thoughts there?
Oh, that sounds good.
So I will say, or make the change here. Green is go. So when we provide an update, or when Ally, if you provide an update at Tuesday's meeting, we can highlight these as the next, the green ones as the ones that the committee is going to work on. And by extension, I will update staff so that they know this work is coming and their work is going to be needed too here. The reason I'm going to jump ahead is because it's related, but the reconsideration of library materials goes hand in hand with the collection development policy, and that one has no date. And we have referenced the files that we have here in the library in our paperwork, and we weren't able to find when that was last updated. So, I mean, from a director's standpoint, I'd recommend having that updated and reviewed around the same time. And having the board just walk through that process last fall when there was a reconsideration request. The work and the process is fresh in your all's minds, so that's a benefit. Any thoughts or comments about that one?
That makes sense to add it in as maybe like the third, I guess, because you're saying it would be, or do you think it has to happen while collection development is being reviewed?
Well, let's even just look as, I mean, because I'm just speaking off the top of my head, but it would be helpful to look at it. I think it can be, just based on what I'm seeing, it's really a separate process.
Okay.
I just have a question.
Yes.
So one of the goals is to create a procedure for how we're going to update these, correct? Is that right? That was goal number 4.
Mm-hmm.
So as we're like talking about selecting these, but we still don't really have a procedure for how we're going to update them. So
We did talk, yeah. Well, I mean, we did talk about how typically it's been done. It's that that process does not live on paper anywhere. So like Renee wouldn't have known that the director and staff do, a draft policy and then it goes to the board. Like the idea of, I said this to Renee, which is a horrible saying, but a hit by a bus plan that like, if you disappeared tomorrow, would someone know what to do for a policy revision?
Yeah.
And so number 4 could be done at the same time as, I mean, like I can already start documenting what I did for the first 3 policies that you all approved this year.
Yeah.
The director memo, that process, what that document is, what that includes, that going forward, Bonnie's feedback was have the lawyer look at it prior to it going to the board, which I think it just makes sense, as opposed to like if there were changes after the board approved a policy and then the lawyer looks at it. So there are some things that I can start writing down now. But then there might be other policies that need more documentation in terms of the research itself. Is that kind of what you're asking or wondering?
Yeah, because I'm just curious because I feel like the procedural document is the most important, is like, I don't, maybe your staff knows how the procedure works, but like as a committee member, I don't really know. We've talked briefly about how the procedure would work, but it's kind of hard to understand like how we move forward with any of the policies once we've chosen which ones we're going to review, if we don't have a procedure for how they would be updated and how the committee's like supporting that work.
That
Can
makes
I-
total- yeah.
Can I
yeah.
just like repeat back so I make sure, at least maybe I'm interpreting it weird, but my thought was like what Renee said, it could be developed while we're doing the review. So if Renee wrote down, this is how it's been done, right? Like has been done for these past few policies we've revised. And then we as a committee look at that and say, okay, now we've done 3 or 4 policy revisions, and here are the areas in this procedure that work, and here are the areas that don't, and then make that change based on experience, so that we like, because I'm with you, like I didn't know that the director typically did that, because that is how it's done at many libraries, but it makes sense because they're the people who are living it. But I think we could, if Renee could write it down, and then we could discuss, okay, we've done this 3 times now. Here are the pain points, and here are the points that we should continue doing, and then just kind of revise it as we live through the actual process.
Yes, because so for all these that we're talking about, the director Renee is going to start revising them first. Is that right?
Yes.
And
what I would say in addition to that is, if there's a policy that's brand new, that like you all as a committee are like, we don't have this policy, we need it, or something happens at the library, right? And sometimes, unfortunately, you're not in a proactive stance, you're reactive, right? So something happens, and when the library board determines a new policy is needed, then this committee could help do some of the research. I think it's going to come up with regards to these computer and technology ones, that the committee, some of the members of the committee and some of the members of the board already did research because of the computer issue that happened, what other libraries are doing. And so that feedback can be looped into the process. And so in the future, if there's a policy that needs creation and the committee wants to divvy up responsibility to research, I think, we could document that and put that as part of the procedure, that's an option.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure I understood. So, but for the most of the ones that we're working on right now, which are revising ones, it would be director and staff, and then it comes before the committee, and then we help to revise. Is that right?
Yeah, I think annual reviews or biannual reviews, that is going to be part of the procedure. Even just, so I'm part of this Directors University conference. I'm going to Springfield in a couple weeks. And today, ironically, was the policy day where we had homework, and then we discussed the homework, and it was all in policy. And so one of the things that they talked about was like, it might even be helpful training or learning for your board, where you present a policy to the board on an annual basis as like a reminder, oh yeah, the library has this policy because. So that could also be part of this procedural document. What is this committee's responsibility in terms of ongoing learning and support of the whole board for all the organizational policies? So I think there's a lot that we could consider for that procedural document.
The educational piece is really nice, because I don't think sometimes everyone knows all the policies that go into everyday life in the library.
Absolutely. Or like, when we onboard new trustees, maybe a member of this committee is kind of assigned to them to say, hey, this is all the information about the policies. These are the things that I want you to know. Or maybe even like shares this procedural document with them
Right.
or walks them through it so that they feel supported on that policy, in that policy area of work as a trustee.
Right.
I like that idea.
I do too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I know that was like an aside, but
No, I think it's
No.
very
Right in that.
relevant.
Totally, yeah.
And
Yeah.
also it's like it's the chicken and the egg at the same time.
Right,
We don't
right.
have a lot of this policy. We don't have a lot of this process in place. We know we need the policy. We know we need the process. We have to do
Right.
it kind of at the same time until we get it finalized.
Yeah. Okay, thank
Yeah,
you very
It
much.
was really valuable, of course.
Now I understand. Thank you very much. I understand now.
Sure thing.
I also think and Renee and I talked about this a little bit, like this year feels like lion's share of the work. And then like, because once that procedure is like written down and once all the policies feel like they're under control and up to date, it won't feel like so much moving forward. Like it should automate itself in terms of the timeline and like, I guess.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
And if your policies are up to date, 2 years of informing changes in the profession or changes in the environment, or technology, for example, like applying new things or new factors into the policy, it's not going to seem as daunting as opposed to like 1993 policy. We have to
Right.
keep up for the last, or update for the last 30 years or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, I said 1 or 2 years, given like our rotation, I think it's going to feel like that for at least this first year. And that's good that we know that. That's all right. So the rest of the policies I think are a little bit more up in the air. So I don't necessarily, at least in terms of maybe my opinion, I think we were going to highlight this to go along with, was there committee support for that to go along with the collection development policy?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So the remainder of the policies that Ally and I are proposing to the committee, library user conduct, computer use policy, use of library provided wireless network.
Yeah. I mean, I
Go
think
ahead, jump in there, Jenny.
I was going to say, I think since the computer use policy has already been an issue in the past, I think that has to be a priority because you wouldn't want something to happen and we haven't updated the policy. And the research is already, some of the research has been done, right? So.
And yes, just to add on and reiterate, that's what the Special Topics Committee recommended. They recommended the computer use policy, the use of library provided wireless network, the library user conduct policy, and the safe child policy. And so of all of those, I would agree with you that we are in a good situation to discuss and update and revise the computer use policy as an organization.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, any further, or Ally, any thoughts on that one?
No, I think it's relevant to, enough that needs to be prioritized, and that was the recommendation coming out of special topics. Yeah.
I'll add that
Makes
here.
sense.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those things where you've got the computer use policy and then you've got the user conduct policy, and there's probably going to be reference in the user conduct policy about the computer use policy. So making sure that the computer one is firm before changing it, to be reflected in the user conduct policy will be important.
Yeah.
In terms of, just to clarify, because I'm writing in our minutes and just for my own planning, right now, we know at least one thing that I'm going to do before the next meeting is kind of chunking up that personnel policy and starting to look at sections, staff input that. Should we plan on doing that then for these 3 policies? So collection, development, computer use, and reconsideration. So adding those in, or do we want to say, okay, personnel, we're breaking that out for the next meeting and maybe pick one other one to bring, kind of like having reviewed and, prepared to discuss for the next committee meeting, just so that we can move forward without maybe trying to bite off too much?
I think that's reasonable, and I'm interested in Matt and Jenny's perspectives, but before I just want to add that I think of all of the policies, where we as a staff are most able to pivot and provide the board and this committee with updates this fastest. Like, I'm thinking of the length of the policies, right? The library user conduct policy, I was going to say, I've been doing a lot of work on that this week. We could be in a position to provide this committee with a draft next month. And that would just get another one off the plate. But because as I was reviewing it, it's a lot of the same issue. I don't know why I keep going blurry. Probably internet. A lot of the same issues I'm finding with this policy are repetition. There's already 2 sections that we can take away because we have separate policies for them.
Suspension, yeah,
Yes, exactly. And the safe child.
right.
Repetition, cleanup of some language. There's some, it's very repetitive in terms of the way that it's written. And I think just like what I did with the draft for the meeting room policy, it can be presented in a different way that makes it a lot more readable. I'll just reference it now. And I would tell you too that there are sections that are just that need to kind of be removed. Like, there's procedural wording and then there's policy wording, and we've got some procedural things in here that I don't think we need. And then the main thing is I think there are too many rules. I mean, like, libraries now are moving towards patron conduct policies that are positive language, like telling what type of behavior we need to see, like what's the responsibility of the library to provide a safe, courteous, and respectful and customer service oriented environment, and what's the responsibility of the patron or the user to uphold that agreement. And this is just very like the wording is very much like teacher student. It feels very off-putting. And as an organization, when we have situations that come up and we give people a copy of our user conduct policy, it's helpful for reviewing it and in understanding it, to have it be as plain language and kind of more positive language focused. I'll also say too, one thing, Tuesday you're going to be having a proposal from Bonnie and myself for new legal representation. And I don't know if Bonnie has talked to any of you individually, but I'm very confident in our change, in the reasons why for our changes, but specifically with regards to the policy work that we need to do. This new firm is going to give us a lot of people in their firm that specialize in different area of library law, whereas our current legal representation has about 4 or 5 people in it, and they don't necessarily specialize, as opposed to this new legal firm, which has a team of about 40, and they all focus on different things. And I was thinking about the policy work and how much we're going to be sending them in terms of review. And I'm really confident in some of their work. Gail Borden, Northbrook Library, Glenview Library, these are large libraries with very strong policies. And I've worked at a library with this firm in representation. So all that to say, as of Tuesday, we'll have, if it goes to the board and if it is supported, that change, we may have new legal representation that could turn around our policies faster than we experienced with our previous legal representation. And that was a concern that Bonnie and I had, just with the lack of responses that we were getting. So I'm confident that a policy such as this could be, I'm going on for a long time, I'm sorry, but it could be turned around very quickly.
That's good.
Yeah. Any other feedback about the policies and what we should be talking about, to Allie's question Do we want to pick another policy to start segmenting now?
I would suggest maybe because the personnel and collection development policies are so big, maybe we go with the same approach. I'm happy to go through and kind of chunk them up and break them out. Knowing that those are two that are going to take a little longer, especially with the personnel input we need from HR source and staff feedback and all of that. So I will gladly take on those two as sort of like parsing them out in preparation. And then should we all review the computer use policy and be prepared to discuss it with revisions at the next committee meeting next month?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
and I can ask you, Matt, is it possible to collect all of that feedback and research that the rest of the board members did and have it in one place for this committee to review?
Yeah, I could work on compiling that. I think that's a reasonable expectation for the next monthly meeting of this committee. Yeah.
If that's what Ally's suggesting, yeah. Mhm.
Yep.
I do have some of it already. I presented an overview to the special topics committee, but I don't know if there were notes from Bonnie or your visits or research of the policy. I don't know. I don't remember now.
There might be some notes from our visits, but I think it would be more helpful to have research of the policy, which I can help to pull together just from those libraries that we canvassed.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Ally,
So I'll take that as a deliverable.
sorry. And Allie, I'm happy to help you with the chunking up if you show me like how it would be done.
Sure. I'm going to just take a stab at it and like the process, and then I'll share it with you and you can let me know if you're like, that makes no sense.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm happy to take the other one if you want to do the
Okay.
first one of them. So
Cool. I'll start with the personnel policy and maybe.
okay.
So I want to jump in here and say that the two of you communicating together is technically a quorum of this committee.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Being committee work, right? And so we could talk about it now that we're in the meeting. I could bring up one of these and just run through it and you two could talk now. Otherwise, it wouldn't be something that you two could discuss outside of committee. Given
But could Allie work on it and then show me what she share it with the committee if we
Yes.
don't have like two-way conversation?
Yes, that could be done. Absolutely.
So yeah, maybe if she could just you could just work on the first one and then I'll take a stab at the second one, Allie, and I'll send it back to you. And then you could tell me, if there's things that are left undone before our next committee meeting, then we could just discuss it at the meeting.
Okay. What I'll plan on doing is I will add a tab to the bottom of this policy tracker.
Okay.
And name it I don't know, I'll think of and I'll make it like just a template so that I'll fill it in and then you can see it. So we wouldn't even need to necessarily have the communication, but I'll like put it in there and then we can use that as like a jumping off point. So you can see where the policy or the personnel policy has been broken out or how it was. And then we can just see if it works that way, just to avoid any back and forth. Does that sound okay, Jenny?
That sounds great.
Okay, cool. I will work on just like a little template graph just so it's clear.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Allie and Jenny and Matt.
Yeah.
And I would jump in here and say that I can move the editing and revision process forward of the library user conduct policy. I can move that work forward with the staff. So that way we all have wheels turning, but they're all moving towards different end goals or different areas of work for the committee. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight the green one. And then whatever, I would even say that this could be drafting, Allie, because that's kind of where I'm at already.
Okay.
And then I could say, draft revision presented to committee at either August or September monthly committee meeting, depending on how far I get with staff. I'm trying to balance like how much I take on to provide more capacity for staff and managers, and where I find opportunities for staff and managers to jump into the process. Like the public comment policy, that just needed to happen as soon as possible. But every other policy needs to have staff input, especially library user conduct. So like Katie, as head of circulation and reference, oversees the staff that interact with customers, and really essentially all managers want to be involved in setting the rules and guidelines for user conduct. So I'm thinking it might be closer to September, but I think we're making good progress. Okay. So then I would say, the last one that I think relates to the computer use policy, it sounds like the computer use policy, we're going to focus on that one first. And then this other one will happen after. So that can stay yellow and just be on hold, maybe. I don't know if that's a status that you want to use, Ally, or whatever, whatever you recommend.
No, I think that's fine.
And then, wanting to discuss all of the policies, Matt suggested we look at the ones that had no date and kind of use that as, or at least inform discussions. So just scrolling down to the end. And so I'm looking at this list. Yes. Allie, if you added this one, that definitely needs to be there. Or actually, I would even say remote attendance at board meetings. That is part of the governance one that we already have. So it's under your bylaws. And that is,
Okay.
I'll just go here. It's this first one. Or maybe it's not. It's governance and organizational structure. So remote participation meetings. So that thankfully doesn't need to be a separate policy unless the group decides it to be. It already exists in your bylaws.
Oh yeah, got it. I just moved it over to a note rather than a separate policy.
Perfect. So yeah, that could be something that the group wants to bring up. The other ones down here, reference services policy. Now, some libraries have this policy and some libraries don't. We do have this policy. And what this does is it informs the scope and the responsibility of the library in answering questions and providing reference. And so there are libraries that have it and there are libraries that don't. And sometimes what you'll see in reference services, it includes interlibrary loan. This is another example of how this looks like one policy, but then if you look here, it still looks like one policy, but do you want it to be one policy is a whole other thing. It identifies what the library will and will not circulate. So down here, what's available for interlibrary loan, what does the library send out to other libraries, and then what do we request in from other libraries. And then reference services is often just a statement about the transactional experience of asking questions at the desk. All reference questions are treated as confidential. We use authoritative resources. We could include a statement about misinformation and link to our collection development policy here. We don't have 24-hour ask away online live chat reference service anymore. We don't. So just a couple of areas that need to be updated for this one, but just to give you a high level overview. This has kind of gone away with the desire for libraries to make their policies more plain language and transparent. And this reference services is folded into, like, for example, the patron conduct policy, where we talk about what the library is going to guarantee that you receive in terms of our services. But some people still have it. Interlibrary loan, yep, separate. And then Freedom of Information Act policy. So you all have received your training, and this policy is essentially the process of requesting information from the library, and how FOIA requests are handled. And so the policy states very specifically how we receive them, how much amount of time the library has to respond. Some of it is state statute. If there is any copying, photocopying that is required, we talk about the rates with which those photocopies are going to be charged, and that charge is on the user or the person who submits the FOIA request. When staff are available and when the records will be available. So this one is something I'd like the lawyer to see because it's very procedural, but because FOIAs are mandated by government institutions such as ourselves, I think that's probably why we have a separate Freedom of Information Act policy, to stipulate what exactly that process is and what we're accountable for and what the patron, the requester, is accountable for. I don't know, I'd want to talk to our lawyer on that. Other ones, confidentiality of library records, gifts and donations, that could potentially fold into the collection development policy, but not necessarily, because gift and donations can be more than just materials. And I realize it's getting late, so I want to kind of move quickly, but this stipulates what types of gifts we'll accept and who's the authorized person to accept them. I don't know how old this is, so that's the background of that policy. Bulletin board and posting and handouts, that needs updating. I mentioned that there's a lot of inconsistency between procedure and policy with that. But we don't know when the last one that was updated. We're a public library, so it's all about freedom of information, but how we choose to post information is informed by this policy. Do we post anything? You know, the fundraiser hosted by this for-profit business down the street, or the free resource available from PACE so that people know information about accessing free public transportation. How do we determine what information is shared to the community? So we're constantly having to say yes or no or why, and that's what this policy governs. Home delivery and photo policies, also no dates. So any reflections on that list that would impact or change the prioritized list that we've already developed, or just hold on to, you want to just hold on to these until maybe next year?
I would maybe hold on to them, or suggest holding on to them. The only one maybe would be like gifts and personnel policy, if there's anything in our, which at brief scan, I don't think there is, in terms of like accepting. No, it doesn't look like it's in there.
And so I think the distinction between this policy and then the personnel aspect of it is that the way that I understand this policy is that it's gifts to the library, but gifts to staff,
I don't think
that should be in the personnel policy, identified as separate.
Cool. So I don't think it would be like a contingent thing. Yeah, I'd be comfortable holding on these personally.
Yeah, likewise. There's, from my point of view, there's nothing here, save maybe the FOIA, but that could be just offloaded to an outside counsel that it needs to be prioritized over anything we've already selected.
I'm gonna make it yellow then. Oh no, I'm
That's
sorry.
Yes.
I was going to make then FOIA yellow. Just as a reference to come back to it. Jenny, Allie, what do you think about that?
That's fine.
Yeah.
And if the board approves the engagement letter with the new legal firm, the group is called Ansel and Glink, and they provide free pro bono service to all Rails libraries on the Open Meetings Act and FOIA requests. That's how I was introduced and connected. I already knew them, but I was calling Julie Tappendorf. She's one of their lawyers on the firm, and talking to her about Open Meetings Act, and I had a couple of those questions. And so I have experience already with them, and I'm very impressed with the quality of service and the fact that they even do that as a service to all Rails libraries out of their own pocket to support this need for libraries across the consortium. I think is really great. So all I'm saying is I know they're experts in the topic. So okay, it's already 8:18. Looking back at the agenda, if I can find it. Any other comments about the prioritized list? Allie, do you want to kind of review what we just discussed?
Yeah, so we have flagged the high priority items, which include personnel collection development, computer use, user conduct, wireless use, and reconsideration of materials as high priority. I will work on analyzing the personnel policy. Jenny will work on analyzing the collection development policy using a template that is in the works on that second tab. And then Matt, you were going to, wait, where did I lose it? In my minutes. Matt, you were going to look at the computer use policy, right, with the takeaways that the Special Topics Committee has provided.
Yep. Yes.
And then we also noted that these policies will be closely followed by the reconsideration of library materials policy, since that will influence or be influenced by the collection development policy. And then we have, just to conclude that section, the FOIA policy is sort of flagged as like a medium priority policy, is something that we can leverage our new legal counsel for input on.
And you've got me moving the library user conduct policy forward with staff for revision.
Yes.
To potentially bring to the August or September committee meeting.
Yes, as like in drafting progress.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions on that? Or I think we're all on the same page there. Yeah. So we've determined next steps. So great. Moving on to the next item, or the last item of the agenda. Any and other business related to bylaws and policy for the committee to share with each other?
Nothing on my end.
No.
All right. Well, with that, thank you all for a great discussion. Do I have a motion? Oh, excuse me, before I move on, next meeting, I will send a doodle poll for us to schedule a meeting in August. If you have any times that you are going to be out or unavailable, let me know either now or send me an email. And I'll avoid putting those times for the August date. I know that's a busy month where people go away and then they're prepping for school. So if there are any days that just don't work for you, let me know via email, and then I will get that doodle poll out to meet in August. I think the goal could be to meet before the August board meeting, or if we feel like there's just more good work of the committee happening, it could be after the board meeting too. Whatever the group wants, I can shoot for either option. Preferences?
I think
Okay.
before, so we could maybe come armed, but it's just going to be, I acknowledge that August is going to be difficult with travel schedules and.
Mm-hmm.
I
After
actually
school,
was
yeah.
surprised that the board still met in August when I was reviewing the yearly meeting. Glencoe board, when I was there anyway, they took August off. So, you know, it is what it is. I will work on scheduling a doodle poll or putting together a doodle poll with dates before the August board meeting. And we'll see.
I'll
if we
be
can find
gone.
something.
I'll be gone the 8th through the 11th.
Okay. August 8th through the 11th, Jenny out. And Allie, do you know anything about your are you gonna be out at all?
Probably the last week of August, so the 28th, but that's after the board meeting, so.
Perfect. Okay. And if anything changes, Matt, just let me know. Otherwise, I'll put some dates on the calendar. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? All right, the meeting is officially adjourned at 8:23 p.m.
Thank you.
Hey,
Thanks for
thank
taking
you.
notes. Thanks, everybody. Great
Thanks, everyone.
meeting.
Bye.
Have a good
Bye.
day, evening.